Hello there, you're watching All 24 News, World News Program, live from the capital Algiers with me, Karim Fazakri, and up next are the headlines. The 7th African Union EU Summit is underway in Luanda, Angola, with calls for African countries to get a permanent UN Security Council seat and debt restructuring. Also in our news, from the 7th AU-EU Summit, the Sahrawi presidency says the summit reaffirmed that the Sahrawi state is an irreversible reality. Next up, in Morocco, Meta reports highlight digital disinformation campaigns promoting normalization with the Zionist entity amid growing economic pressures. And later on in Gaza, Zionist raids have killed 4 Palestinians and repeated ceasefire violations, condemned by Algeria at the UN Security Council. The details are right up. Welcome back to the details. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, the 7th African Union EU Summit is indeed underway in Luanda, Angola, with calls for African countries to get a permanent UN Security Council. So technically, the representing President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf, took part in the opening session of the 7th African Union EU Summit in Luanda, Angola, under the theme Strengthening Peace and Prosperity Through Multilateral Cooperation. Leaders are focusing on peace, security, governance, and ways to boost African-European partnership. And at the 7th AU-EU Summit in Luanda, Angola, the AU's chairperson, Mahmoud Ali Youssef, made a strong case for Africa to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Speaking at the opening session on Monday, Youssef said the step is about giving African states their rightful place in the world, both politically and geographically. He also highlighted the ongoing efforts of African leaders to achieve a peaceful, integrated, and prosperous continent.
Achieve our shared vision for peace. I'm pleading for European investments in the transformation. L'Afrique est en proie avec ses propres crises politiques sécuritaires.
Africa is grappling with its own political, security and development crises. However, our leaders have been thinking for decades and charting the way forward to achieve the ambition of a peaceful, integrated and prosperous Africa. In a context of increasing international polarization, Africa must position itself. We are a full member of the G20. We demand our place on the United Nations Security Council on the basis of ideological and geographical consensus, and we call for fair representation within international financial institutions.
The AU Commission chairperson also urged European leaders to rethink the international financial system and make that more sustainable.
L'Afrique et l'Europe partagent une histoire.
Africa and Europe share a history, but above all, they share multi-dimensional common interests. Our continent is counting on Europe to step up investment in infrastructure projects. Our continent is calling for a review of the terms of its debt management to make it more sustainable. Africa is calling for the reform of the global financial architecture to reduce the cost of capital and facilitate access to substantial financing. Europe must play a central role in this.
On a related note, at the 7th African Union-European Union Summit in Luanda, Angola, the Sahrawi President Ibrahim Ghali made a notable appearance. Upon arriving at the conference center, he was warmly received by Angolan President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, highlighting the Sahrawi Republic's continued presence on the continental stage.
نحن نحضر للقمة السابعة للاتحاد We're attending the 7th African Union-European Union Summit, to which we wish full success, and we thank Angola and its president for a warm welcome.
And on the same occasion, Sahrawi President Brahim Ghali took the floor to stress a long-standing point. The Sahrawi people still await the full exercise of their right to self-determination and independence. Ghali reminded leaders that Western Sahara remains Africa's last unresolved decolonization issue, with the Sahrawi people continuing to face violations of their rights.
The Sahrawi Republic wishes to remind this summit that there is still a decolonization issue, the last of its kind in Africa, that remains unresolved. There are still an African people, the Sahrawi people, who continue to struggle with patience and steadfastness. They wait from you and from the international community at large that they finally be granted the opportunity to exercise their legitimate, inalienable and non-prescriptible right to self-determination and independence, just like the other peoples of Africa and the world.
Sahrawi Presidential Advisor Nanalabat Rashid highlighted that the Sahrawi Republic's participation in the 7th AU Summit in Luanda reaffirms its status as a full African Union member. Here's Kiri Mustafawi.
At the African-European Summit in Luanda, one moment stood out: the Sahrawi Republic taking its seat officially, confidently, as a full member of the African Union. And this wasn't just a symbolic appearance, it was a direct message to anyone still questioning the Sahrawi state standing on the continental stage.
We are part of the Sahrawi delegation participating in a very normal manner, like all the other African countries participating. The Sahrawi state is a founding member of this African organization, a member with full membership and committed to Africa's development and peace, as well as to all partnerships that the African Union establishes with its European and international counterparts, such as the European Union.
From the opening session, the Sahrawi presence made one thing clear: the political reality is firmly established. The Sahrawi people and their state hold full EU representation, and no amount or pressure of propaganda has managed to change that, either in Africa or abroad.
What is expected of Africa and Africans and all this work is that sovereignty over the Sahrawi territories be established, as it is the last colony in Africa. Our presence today at the 7th summit is not the first, and it undermines the Moroccan campaigns based on falsification.
In Luanda, the Sahrawi delegation sat at the same table as Morocco and European countries, a powerful scene on its own, a scene that once again challenges the narratives pushed by Rabat and reinforces what has already become a deeply rooted political and legal reality.
As you can see today, we and the Moroccan kingdom are sitting at the same table, in the same row, and we have the same order on the African continent. So the Moroccan media campaign is on one side, and the reality you see with your own eyes is on the other.
And this participation isn't new. It's a part of a long, steady diplomatic approach that keeps gaining ground every year. Today, the Sahrawi Republic is not just present, it's actively shaping discussions on peace, security and development across the African continent.
In the same context, Spain's People's Party parliamentary bloc has urged the government to review its stance on Western Sahara, voicing strong support for a self-determination referendum. In talks with the Polisario Front in the Canary Islands, 5 MPs reaffirmed solidarity with the Sahrawi people, while the Polisario representative stressed the ongoing struggle for freedom.
All proposals must be discussed and the final solutions must respect the United Nations agreements. We call on the Spanish government to show greater commitment to the Sahrawi issue and to provide more support. The Sahrawi people will continue their struggle until they achieve their ultimate goal, which is independence.
And in Morocco, social media firms have confirmed Morocco's involvement in digital campaigns targeting Algeria, with reports revealing a network of anonymous accounts spreading fake news coordinated from and within Morocco and linked to influential regime figures. Moroccan activists accused the Makhzen regime of using schools to promote normalization with the Zionist entity. Protesters in Tétouan on Sunday condemned curriculum changes they say glorify the Zionist entity and warn of the long-term impact on future generations.
It's a disgrace how our country keeps normalizing with this entity, a normalization in every sector. I recently saw a primary school textbook that openly promote this normalization. They are infiltrating like spreading poison in water, but we will expose and pursue them with all our strength.
And in economy-related development, but still in Morocco, cash shortages are spreading to commercial banks, which reported a one-week deficit of around $15 billion, signaling growing economic troubles for the Makhzen regime, according to BMCE Capital Global Research. In another topical development, Palestinian medical sources confirm 4 people were killed and several others injured after a series of Zionist airstrikes and shelling in Gaza. 2 were hit in Beni Suhaila, Khan Yunis, and 2 more in Shuja'iyya, East Gaza City. Meanwhile, rescue teams recovered 12 bodies from the rubble of a family home destroyed in Al-Maghazi camp, and a child also died from earlier injuries. Despite the ceasefire, occupation forces continue airstrikes and home demolitions across the entire strip. In Gaza, families are mourning again despite the so-called ceasefire. Drone strikes and tank shells have killed more Palestinians, while daily life near the yellow line remains a struggle. Water, food and shelter all scarce. Here's Salman Asib.
In Gaza, scenes that have sadly become all too familiar played out again. Families in Khan Yunis and Gaza City gathering to bury loved ones killed in the latest round of Zionist fire, despite a ceasefire that's supposed to be holding. At Nasr Hospital in Khan Yunis, crowds carried out the bodies of 2 Palestinians. Medics say they were killed when an occupation drone fired a missile east of the city. Among the mourners, frustration was unmistakable. In Gaza City, another funeral of Mohammed al-Hawari described how suddenly her relative was taken. We were sitting, we then got the news that in Shuja'iyya they shot them. Why? I don't know. As you can see, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. Palestinian medics say today's death also include a man hit by a tank shell on Gaza City's eastern edge. The occupation military says it opened fire after spotting what it called terrorists crossing the yellow line, the newly marked boundary indicating its pullback under the truce. But even far from the funerals, daily life remains extremely difficult near that line. Much of Gaza City is rubble and basic survival
The almost daily struggle for us is the struggle of searching for water and food. This is the most important thing after the destruction of the houses and the destruction of our entire area, is that we daily wait for water. Of course, the water networks and the sewage networks are all destroyed. They were all destroyed because of the ground invasion for the area and its destruction. All of them were destroyed. Our life is extremely hard, but we have nowhere to go except our area, our houses and our places.
He says gunfire continues and bullets recently hit a neighboring house, again raising questions about what the truce really means.
They say there is a ceasefire. Where is the ceasefire? We don't have water or anything, and there is sewage. All the infrastructure has been lost. And they speak of the border crossings. Where are the border crossings? We can't see anything. We want to live like other people.
Under the ceasefire, the Zionist still controls more than half of the strip. Gaza's health ministry says more than 340 Palestinians have been killed since the truce began. Humanitarian aid is also stuck. Meanwhile, UNRWA says more than 6,000 trucks of food are sitting off Gaza's crossings, unable to enter, leaving over 90% of the population dependent on aid, often just one meal a day. And as winter approaches, the gap between what's promised and what's happening on the ground continues to widen.
And in the occupied West Bank, Israeli occupation forces arrested at least 15 Palestinians in dawn raids across the West Bank on Monday, including former prisoners. 8 were taken from Tubas and Tulkarm, 4 from Ramallah, and 3 each from Nablus and Bethlehem, with reports of house sieges and assaults on residents. In the same context, Algeria strongly condemned the ongoing Zionist attacks in the occupied Palestinian territories, saying they continue despite the Gaza ceasefire. At a UN Security Council briefing, Ambassador Ammar Benjama stressed that the entity is violating the ceasefire not just in Gaza, but also in parts of Lebanon and Syria.
Thank you, President.
Merci.
The occupied Palestinian territory is still the theater of bloodshed. In 40 days since the ceasefire began, and in flagrant violation of the agreement, Israel killed more than 310 Palestinians, many of whom are women and children. Algeria strongly condemns this brutal and continued onslaught. From Lebanon to Syria, to Gaza, to the West Bank, Israel is blatantly violating arrangements and disregarding mediators and guarantors. The experience of Resolution 2735 is still fresh in our minds.
Ambassador Ammar Benjama urged the mediators and guarantors of the U.S. peace plan in Gaza to act quickly and decisively, making sure the occupation sticks to its ceasefire commitments.
In defiance of the clear indication that Israel accepted the U.S. proposal, and yet it broke the ceasefire in total impunity, in total immunity. We call upon the mediators and guarantors of the peace plan for immediate to take decisive measures to preserve the ceasefire and to hold the occupying power to its commitments.
Algeria's UN ambassador warned that the recent surge in settler attacks in the West Bank isn't random, but rather part of a broader effort to erase the idea of a future Palestinian state. Let's take a listen.
Campaign of oppression is not limited to the besieged Gaza Strip. In the West Bank, situation is just as grave. We are witnessing an unprecedented escalation of settler terrorism, an extremist campaign of violence, of intimidation, supported and shielded by the Israeli occupying forces. Extremist settlers burn homes, burn mosques, burn olive groves. They terrorize communities. They seize land at an alarming rate. These blatant violations and heinous crimes are all efforts aiming at ethnic cleansing. Yes, ethnic cleansing. designed to kill the very idea of a future Palestinian state.
On the same occasion, Algeria's diplomats stressed the need to hold those behind war crimes in Gaza accountable and that there is no room for them to slip away from justice.
The immense suffering of the Palestinian people demands concrete actions from the Security Council. It requires a genuine commitment to, first, preserving the ceasefire agreement. This must be our immediate and absolute priority. The killing must stop. Second, launching the reconstruction efforts. This means the complete and immediate opening of all crossing to allow for the massive unimpeded flow of humanitarian aid and flow of reconstruction material and equipment.
Moving on to other news now, Algeria is doubling down on clean hydrogen as a key part of its energy transition. Minister Mohamed Arqab told an international forum in Riyadh organized by the 21st General Conference of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, aka UNIDO, that the country has a salt hydrogen strategy in place, backed by pilot projects, a regulatory framework, and incentives for investors. Thanks to Algeria's vast solar resources, Arqab says the country can produce renewable hydrogen at a scale competitively. He highlighted the Southern Hydrogen Corridor project aimed at transporting hydrogen to Europe, with support from the EU and technical assistance from UNIDO. Arqab also stressed Algeria's commitment to working with partner countries and African neighbors to boost energy, industrial development, and knowledge transfer, making clean hydrogen a cornerstone for sustainable growth.
Social constraints, other environmental constraints.
And back home, Algiers is hosting the International Exhibition of Dates, a big gathering organized by the National Chamber of Agriculture. The event drew producers, exporters, researchers, and international guests, all coming together to showcase Algeria's incredible variety of dates. The agriculture minister and the head of the National Chamber were on hand to highlight the sector's economic importance, support local farmers, and push for innovation.
We are very pleased with the official launch of the International Date Fair organized by the National Chamber of Agriculture. The fair represents an important platform for us to showcase this significant resource embodied by Algerian dates and the abundant production of the Algerian agricultural sector in the field of dates. As you know, Algeria produces more than 11 million quintals of dates annually, with over 3,050,000 varieties of dates. Recently, Algerian dates were recognized for the first time by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, which is a very important acknowledgement, particularly for the Deglet Nour variety. Today, the exhibition brings together 150 exhibitors from various Algerian provinces. The International Date Fair has officially launched, organized by the National Chamber. It provided an important opportunity, especially for producers in the desert regions, where palm trees and oases are central. Algerian dates are renowned for their quality, and the government approach focuses on diversifying export through Algerian products, particularly dates, which are well known in international markets. The fair also offered a chance to engage with international expertise with the participation of 3 foreign countries.
Moving on to other developments in Sudan this time. The head of the Transitional Sovereign Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, pushed back hard against any foreign role in the ongoing crisis, especially from countries he says supported the Rapid Support Forces rebels. Speaking to top military officers on Sunday, he made it clear that the so-called quartet can't be a neutral mediator, pointing to past attacks, killings, and looting linked to the RSF, Al-Burhan emphasized the need for unity within Sudan and warned that some proposed solutions risk dividing the country or forcing rebel groups on the state.
Last week or 2 weeks ago, the mediator presented another paper proposal based on our past experiences with ceasefires. The first one in Jeddah. When we accepted it, the militias continued killing and laying siege. That's why we cannot accept a ceasefire like this. These militias are being supported by certain countries. The solutions they are proposing would only lead to the division of Sudan.
And to other news now, Ukraine sticking with talks to reach a peace deal that actually strengthens the country. Zelensky says Russia must pay for the war and frozen assets should help rebuild. Yasin Orikti has the full report.
Ukraine says it's still committed to working with its partners to reach what it calls a balanced peace deal, one that doesn't leave Kyiv worse off. Speaking by video at the Crimean Platform Summit in Sweden, President Vladimir Zelensky said Ukraine is open to discussing US proposals, but only if they strengthen, not weaken the country. And he repeated a message he's delivered many times: Russia must pay for the war, and frozen Russian assets should go toward rebuilding Ukraine.
Right now, we are at a critical moment, and we are working closely with the United States, with European partners, with many others to define steps that can end Russia's war against us, against Ukraine, and bring real security.
Across Europe and Africa, peace efforts are gaining fresh momentum. While US and Ukrainian teams were in Switzerland trying to adjust the US plans seen by some Europeans as too soft on Moscow, European leaders were meeting in Luanda on the sidelines of the EU-African Union summit. Their focus was keeping Europe united, because a fractured position, they say, only weakens Ukraine.
There is a new momentum in peace negotiations. Yesterday's meeting in Geneva between the United States, Ukraine, the European Union institutions and European representatives marked significant progress. The European Union is committed to continue providing President Zelensky with all the support he needs: diplomatic support, military support, economic support.
For his part, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz added another layer. He said US President Donald Trump had signaled openness to developing a joint plan, something negotiators from Ukraine, the US and the EU started pushing forward in Geneva.
I reported on my telephone conversation with President Trump last Friday. As you know, I reported he was open to jointly develop peace plan. The representatives of Ukraine, the United States of America and the European member states succeeded in doing just that yesterday in Geneva, and we are now taking this message with us.
As for Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk, well, he struck a more cautious tone. He warned that peace doesn't depend solely on European will, but on the political choices of leaders in Kyiv, Washington and Moscow.
I am not sure if we are closer to the peace, because it's not only if it was just our will and our intention, it would be done, but unfortunately, the decision is in the hands of Putin, President Trump, of course, President Zelensky, not only or not mainly in our European.
For now, the diplomatic push is moving on several fronts at once, from Sweden to Switzerland to Angola. But whether this moment becomes a real turning point or just another chapter in a long, exhausting war remains an open question.
And finally, it's time to catch up on other news making headlines in the News in Brief with Sofian Kinturi.
NATO launched military drills in the Baltic Sea on Monday, led by the Finnish Navy and involving 5,000 troops. The Freezing Winds 2025 exercise runs until December 4th, with NATO naval units, mine countermeasures forces, fire jets, and 20 allied ships taking part. French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu expressed optimism on Monday about reaching a consensus on 2026 budget despite tensions in Parliament. Speaking from Matignon after National Assembly rejected parts of the draft budget, he said he remains confident that a parliamentary majority will approve 2026 budget before the end of the year. Belgium's main unions began a 3-day national strike to protest government budget reforms. The action starts with major disruptions to public transport and rail services, including trains between Brussels and Paris. Public services, schools, childcare centers, government offices, and hospitals will be affected, followed by a full strike on Wednesday. At least 3 people were killed in a suicide attack on parliamentary compound in Peshawar. Police say one bomber blew himself up at the gate while another entered the compound. Security forces have cordoned off the area amid fears of more attackers inside.
And finally, snow is back in Tigda, and the Georgia mountain resort has slipped into its classic winter look. Let's discover the view with Zara Farjani now.
At about 1,600 meters above sea level, Tigda reveals its full magic. The first snow always brings the place back to life. Families, hikers, photographers, everyone shows up for a bit of peace, a bit of fun, or just to breathe in the cold mountain air. And like every year, it instantly turns into one of Algeria's top winter spots.
We took advantage of the opportunity because it's the first snowfall of the year in this area at this time. We came and spent great time since the morning. I hope citizens from different regions will come here to enjoy this beautiful place, which brings peace of mind. I also hope they will preserve the environment.
It's our first time here this year because the snow fell here first. As you can see, there are friends and families from different regions of Algeria, especially in winter, because Tigda attract more tourists in winter than in summer.
And the scenery speaks for itself. Blue sky above, green valleys below, and those snowy peaks in between, a natural painting you don't need a frame for. Tigda isn't just beautiful though. The area is rich with wildlife and rare vegetation, a reminder that this mountain ecosystem has both environmental and economic value for the region. These ecosystems have been forming for thousands of years, helping stabilize the local climate and creating a natural balance that Georgia is famous for.
The Directorate has mobilized all material and human resources to open all roads and pathways, including the national roads such as the one we are currently on, National Road number 33, which connects the provinces of Beira, Tizi Ouzou and Tigda. This road experiences heavy traffic from tourists, especially on weekends.
Tigda is where raw beauty meets resilience, a place that survives harsh winters yet remains welcoming and full of life. And as the season kicks off, the result stands again as a perfect escape for everyone looking for winter, calm, snowy landscapes, and the timeless charm of the Georgia mountains.
And that's the end of our news. Thank you for watching and take care.